It's an Archaeodeath monthly review with Professor Howard Williams.
So I've been doing this YouTube channel now for 2 months, and I've been going strong with a series of videos presenting my past research and reflecting on current debates in the world of mortuary archaeology, archaeology of commemoration and memory, and monumentality. And I want to use this video to survey what I've been doing in the last month, as well as in terms of my vlogging and blogging, but then also to reflect on some broader issues that I think are pertinent at this time. So as usual, I've written sort of circa 15 blogs a month, and this month has been no exception, and I want to take you through what the topics I've covered. So first of all, I started off this month by looking at more collective nouns for gravestones, and I've been long reflecting on the fact that we don't have a collective term for gravestones, like a sort of an assemblage of gravestones, and that's particularly frustrating when they've been moved and rearranged and reassembled in churchyards, chapels, cemeteries and so on. You could call them a lapidarium if it's a collection of removed stonework. That's one term we could use, but there isn't one. So have a look at that blog post for reflections that I opened up to viewers and readers to reflect on what they think about that topic, and they got some really interesting responses onto my blog and via social media of collective nouns we could deploy. Some inspired by the animal world, some inspired by other contexts, some just humorous, but that's a really interesting point of reflection on how we treat gravestones and their life histories as they are established, carved, erected. They are used as a focus of commemoration for a while, but then they are removed or displaced into other kinds of location. And in many different graveyards and churchyards and cemeteries, we see these collections on display. It's almost undead or half dead, no longer active as a focus of memorialization, but still a key part of our heritage environment. My next blog post looked at revisiting mortality. This is a special issue I produced in 2011, reflecting on archaeological approaches to contemporary death and how archaeologists can look at the 20th and 21st century in terms of its death rituals, its mortuary landscapes and commemorative practices. I then did another retro looking at hogback stones, a focus of my research interests, and I looked at how hogback stones have been a focus of commemoration, and I thought about doing a review of a book I co-edited in 2015, Early Medieval Stone Monuments. And so that book was a major piece of work I produced. I had a chapter in it on hogbacks, but also there's a range of other chapters addressing Irish, British and Scandinavian early medieval stone sculpture and carved stone monuments. So I did a reflection on that, and that's linked to a YouTube video. Another blog that was linked to a YouTube video, I looked at Archaeodeath Unlocked, Museum Unlocked. Now, a range of museums have been participating in Professor Dan Hicks's hashtag Museums Unlocked online via Twitter and elsewhere, presenting during the lockdown different aspects of our museums, the stories they tell about past human cultures and about us. And I decided to do my own version from my kitchen using my fridge magnets as my own museum collection. A bit of humour there. Now, then there was a few blog posts I did that haven't been connected to videos. So a field trip I took with my master's students, MA Archaeology of Death and Memory students, before the lockdown was to a series of parish churches in West Cheshire, where we looked at their memorialisation from the Middle Ages through to the present day. And so I reported on the Frodshams 18th century gravestones, and I looked at how that churchyard, historic churchyard of St Lawrence's in Frodsham, now has one of these lapidaria, a collection of redeployed, repurposed 18th century gravestones put back on display upright as if they're marking graves, but of course long dislocated from their original burial location. So I had a post looking at how 18th century gravestones, beautiful and vernacular carvings in their own right, how they have a new identity, a new role in the village churchyard or the town churchyard of Frodsham in Cheshire. I complemented that by looking at, more broadly at Frodsham and thinking about Frodsham's use of its churchyard to house memorials to the cremated dead. Now, churchyards traditionally have been places where you inhume the body, but from the late 19th century, cremation started to become a minority rite in this country, and we see the rise of cremation through the early 20th century, and particularly after the Second World War, cremation boomed and is now the most prominent mode of disposing of the dead. And cemeteries and churchyards had to make new adaptations, new compensations for how the cremated dead are interred and memorialised. And Frodsham has one of the earlier versions of this, where they use a historic wall within the churchyard, a revetment, to provide the focus for both horizontal and vertical commemoration of the cremated dead. And that's linked to my research. And I've recently got a research paper out looking at cremation in the contemporary churchyard. So already my blog post has linked to some of the videos. My blog has gone through quite a few themes linking death and memory, past and present. We also had a quick review of a medieval grave slab I discovered reused into a medieval church wall at Hope in Flintshire during a walk during my lockdown exercise, my government sanctioned exercise. I walked to Hope, and this gravestone I thought had been not noticed before, but actually only very recently Brian and Moira Gittos have published a discussion of this monument. They identified it in the walls of Hope Church and they published it, but they haven't published photographs of it. So my photographs will perhaps be of use to people interested in medieval gravestones, and it shows what is lurking within churchyards still not properly analysed and researched. I then revisited my book from 2017, co-edited with Anna Vestman and Jessica Serezzo-Roman, and did a video about that too, called Cremation and the Archaeology of Death. And then I introduced another new video experiment. I'm playing with using, as well as YouTube, I'm playing with using the social media app, one of the newer ones, TikTok, and trying to communicate via TikTok as well as on YouTube. Now, TikTok requires 15-second or 60-second videos, and at the moment, so far, I've done something every day, and most of it silly, some of it parodying the genre of self-promotion and narcissism that is TikTok, but some of it actually just trying to communicate with a bit of background music, some short snippets of sites I've been to and places I've encountered and thoughts. So trying to be funny as usual, but not really succeeding. I'm embarking on my TikTok experiment. So read up about that on the Archaeodeath blog, or go on TikTok yourself and see what on earth I'm up to. More seriously, I looked at war memorialization, and coinciding with the 75th anniversary of the end of conflict at the end of the Second World War in Europe, VE Day. I composed a post on Brumbow's War Memorial, which is actually situated in a former space where there was a church for the Welsh community, subsided and broke down twice, and they ended up making it into a memorial garden. So that's worth reading up on, as well as looking at Caersalem Calvinistic Chapel in Pentraborton, where it's actually built on the hill fort rampart, an Iron Age hill fort's rampart. I've also got a video forthcoming on this, but I did a blog post about Offa's Dyke at Brumbow, and I also did a post on the coronavirus and Offa's Dyke, which is linked to a video where I counter some misinformation and misrepresentations of Offa's Dyke in relation to the English-Welsh border, which has risen up as a focus of discussion on social media and in the press because of the different easing of lockdown regimes in England and Wales. That's a very controversial topic. I then celebrated Brian Costello, my doctoral researcher, has just passed his Viva Voce examination, and he's now Dr. Brian Costello in all but a few minor corrections. And my final blog post of the month was on Viking Death, looking at an edited collection I did in 2016 in the European Journal of Archaeology, and again linked to a YouTube video. So there's my 15 blog posts, very different themes, looking at my research, looking at key themes relating to the present. And I want to now just give you some quick reflections on what's going on at the moment. Well, and I have actually reflected on the lockdown twice from my position of my expertise. I've commented on the fact that I believe that it was a bad call to close cemeteries. While funerals have been rightly curtailed, cemeteries on the whole, even in urban context, should have remained open, and now they have been, kept open in most places. Churchyards, it's up and down depending on who's opening, what wardens are on duty, but I think that's an important aspect. And I know the emphasis has been on access to churchyards only for those attending, going to see loved ones' graves. But I would say we should have thought about this further earlier on, and thought about the value of churchyards and cemeteries as green spaces, spaces of exercise, spaces of good for mental health, physical exercise, physical health, and places of memorialization and reflection as part of a package, rather than seeing them only as spaces that are sanctioned for visiting graves of particular individuals, important though that is. I've also waded in on the coronavirus lockdown in relation to this misunderstanding of what is England and what is Wales and how it relates to Offa's Dyke. But I would like to say at the end of this video that there is a third area which I'm not sure I will dare to go into in a blog post. I'm not sure, I'll think about it. But of course is the Dominic Cummings disaster. Now, regardless of whether people believe what Dominic Cummings says about the rationale for his visit, and whether we believe it was legal or not for him to have travelled over 260 miles to seek childcare in the form of parents for his young child, whatever we think about that, the mobilisation of the dead has been very interesting in the reaction to the Dominic Cummings story. The outrage, the moral and the social outrage, deploying the dead, those that have recently died, those that are visiting, have been curtailed in their activities to abide by the government's guidelines. The sense of double standards has involved a sense of not only that they haven't been able to do what Cummings did, they felt most people did not travel more than perhaps 600 metres or 800 metres or a mile to gain support, if any. Most people stayed locked down if they got the virus, or or even just have got locked down regardless to try and stem the proliferation of the virus. And so there's that feeling of double standards that's involved both the living and the dead, because people have been able to not been able to go to funerals, have seen loved ones die, and they have respected. They haven't been able to say goodbye properly, and that. The fact that the dead are involved in the outrage against Cummings and this government, the UK government, and Johnson's claim that this is right and appropriate and he acted like every father should is really interesting. And the dead are now part of the conversation. Again, the dead have been mobilised in a political context. Now, I'm not saying, like the government has claimed to, that people are they're making political points out of this. I think this is a genuine, emotionally charged, morally framed objection to the sacrifices that people have undergone to respect the government sanctions on movement, visiting family members, attending funerals, and there they see Chief Advisor to the PM doing something different. Now, you can disagree with me if you like. You can say Cummings gave a good account of himself if you're delusional. Well, I mean, if you take that view. But at the end of the day, what's really interesting is that the dead are involved in this conversation. So anyone that says we're a secular society where the dead don't matter, remember the dead are there, and they are mobilised in discussions when people are really, really angry at the government's protests, and people have been dying. I haven't got the latest stats of today when I'm doing this video, but we're looking at a vast death toll. Now, people have some deniers. People have even called it a hoax to me. Some people have claimed it's a hoax. Well, I'm sorry. I don't know what planet you're on, but in the real world, science has advised us the government was slow in taking up measures, and it's still botching in various ways this lockdown process, and it's just icing on the cake of crap they've delivered up for us that Cummings has been revealed to have at the very least given limited respect to his own government's sanctions, and that probably most likely acted in an irresponsible way in terms of his own family and the broader sanctions delivered. So I mean, as a mortuary archaeologist, that's way outside of my remit, you might think, but actually it does relate to what I'm interested in, is when and how do the human dead come into our conversations as a society. And sadly, given the huge death toll associated with coronavirus, we cannot pretend that the dead are absent from our conversations, our political and cultural and social discussions. So at the end of May, that's a further point for us to think about, and I may come back to in a blog post as the protests and the critical comments around the lockdown and the government's behaviours, individual government representatives' behaviours, elected, unelected officials, as well as the broader processes unfold. But I'd like to say, keep safe, stay as well as you can be within these difficult times. And next month I will be back with more blog posts and vlogs about Archaeodeath, and I will be continuing to mix past and present, looking at death, memory and monumentality in different regards, and I will be trying to not just make individual points about our society, but I'll be trying to look into the deep past to reflect on our attitudes, practices, beliefs and landscapes of death.
If you've enjoyed this Archaeodeath video, why not check out the Archaeodeath blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.